And it's not yet time. You're early.
Oh, mine says 4:01.
Okay, let's do it.
So here we are. The very first thing is the consent agenda for the September 18th meetings. Is there a motion or something?
Yeah, I make a motion that we accept the minutes from the September 18th CPC meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Let's see, do we have to actually vote on this thing? Okay, can we just raise hands? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. Done with that. Let's see. Announcements. The next meeting is November 12th. We can't do the staff update just yet. So let's go to other announcements from commissioners. I'm not hearing any.
Yeah, I don't have any other than what we're going to cover in the agenda.
Well, Stu sent us a link for the meetings from, what's the name of the place? I'm spacing it, but anyway, the folks up in Bend. Ray, you were listening to some of these things.
Go Clean Energy Conference.
Yes, and that was a great conference. I listened to 3 of them: Solar Within Reach, Beneficial Electrification, and Helping Cities Go Low Carbon. They were all very interesting, and I particularly recommend the Helping Cities Go Low Carbon. I think that would be very useful for us. I have the slide deck for that. I got it from the RMI presenter, but mostly it's about taking a look at cityrenewables.org.
So I contacted that organization and asked if there was any way we could get slide decks and recordings, and I haven't heard back. So I'll follow up again.
I think they said that they're going to have a recording for each session available after the conference. So I'm waiting for that as well. Because there are also some good, there were some good sessions on building and solar and energy efficiency and energy scores and the new scores that really taken it into account, net zero buildings and et cetera.
Right,
So when you get those, can you share them with the rest of us rather than everybody reach out separately?
I can go ahead and share the slide deck that I got because I actually had the PDF already. But Jeff, if you want to follow up on that, that would be great.
Yes, I will.
Okay, let's see.
Real quick, Rick, I forgot to mention at the beginning, Steve Vincent with the Vista will not be joining us today. He's having he lost his voice. So I had a very short conversation with him on the call, but he is planning to come on the November meeting if that is okay with everyone.
Well, I don't think an agenda has been put together for that, so I would plan on it for now.
Okay.
We may have a really short meeting here.
I can give a few tidbits of my last conversation with Steve, possibly. It's a very poor substitute, but I can give a little bit.
Great.
Please go ahead.
Oh, you ready now?
Well, I think we're to the point where I assume there's no public forum. Is that right? Okay. And so before you came on, Adam, there's the staff update section. So if you want to do that and then just go right into whatever you have to say about your chat with Steve.
I am probably not very prepared for any sort of a staff update. I could answer any questions about what's going on, but Stu is the day-to-day, obviously, keeper of all these things. Is there anything from where he left off, or is there any particular format of what he normally covers?
Well, let's see. There were two things that I have on my notes that's Stu might have reported on. One is to confirm how clean fuel revenues can be used for electrification in lieu of the Transportation Commission motion, and I'm not familiar with the details of that motion. But there was that, and he was going to check to see if there's still city money available for hot water tank conversion to electric power.
Okay, I'll hit the second one first. The hot water heater or heat pump water heater, right? Is that what the
Yeah, heat pump water heater.
Heat pump water heaters? Yes. So I actually took that one on for Stu, since I've got kind of the coordination with our BPA conservation programs, implementation manual, and how all that works. Dan Cunningham is our residential conservation program specialist. So I met with him, and the changes to the BPA program for ductless heat pumps are long story that we probably don't need to go into. They've dialed back up the incentives BPA has. So those ductless heat pump incentives, we never dialed them down when BPA dialed them down. So we kind of backfilled that loss with city money. The fact that they are now in the next implementation manual, which covers the federal fiscal year starting October 1st, so just starting soon, that goes back up. So there is no city subsidy for those anymore. So that money we are planning to utilize and build out a program for heat pump water heaters. So the answer is yes, we'll be able to kind of modify our current program funding allocations because of the fortuitous change that was done at the BPA level. We can move money around, and that's really what we have three different buckets of money in the conservation budget. One is for solar, which is all local funding. One is BPA in our contractual EEI is what it's called, energy efficiency incentive allocation, that's contractual. And then we have a third bucket, which is we call it Conservation City, which we have done all kinds of different things with over the years to augment or boost or create things that aren't otherwise in the BPA program. So this is one of those. And really what it's probably navigating to, that funding pot kind of merges with the clean fuels thing and becomes our ability to really leverage all things electrification. So we'll probably have solar, we'll still have our BPA budget, and then we'll have, it won't be limited to, but it's predominantly will be electrification funding. It'll be that combination of clean fuels and this other conservation money. So yes is the answer, that we will be able to put that together. It probably will be, program forms and all the regular stuff ready to roll January, possibly earlier, but for sure January.
Yeah, Adam, could you give us I have a question. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. Question is, can you give us an overall kind of a sense of the magnitude of those resources? Are we talking, I know that it would vary year to year, but can you just kind of give us a range or just an order of magnitude sense of it?
Of what we no longer have to.
No, the whole thing, the whole thing together.
Our BPA EEI allocation is about 210,000 or so a year. There's a formula for it, so it's not exactly the same every time. And that's, again, their federal fiscal year. So we always have to juggle a little bit on our reporting. But We have 75,000 a year for solar, and the other city is 80,000 a year, and that is covers also our zero interest loan program that we're looking to make changes to as well. I'm not sure if Stu had the last. Maybe I'll give it a staff update. We didn't get the we didn't make the next round on the big grant ask. So that would have changed how we do our small zero interest loan program. It would have freed that up. It still may. We still have some conversations to how we tweak the programs, but that large $1 million a year for 10 years thing, we dead ended. So, but that's the magnitude of our actual, and 100% of that money that I just described is what goes out the door to customers. We have some other stuff that helps with some of the admin overhead a little bit, but those are our direct dollars for incentive programs.
Thank you.
And how much of that can be directed towards the water heaters?
Well, it's probably going to be whatever we need it to. I suppose if we end up with several hundred of those a year, we would have to think about it. But I think from the get-go, we have plenty to cover that program element. Heat pump water heaters is I'm sure you all know, it's not. It actually fits somewhat select applications. It's not the answer in certain housing types or where existing water heaters. It's not always a great one-to-one replacement, depending upon the configuration of things. So I don't see it as being right off the bat a huge, something that'll mess up our program offerings. It'll be able to ship. My guess would be, I don't know yet what Dan has in mind. He was going to talk with Energy Trust folks too, and also some of our trade ally contractors, just to see what that level of incentive that we want to put out there. And generally, that's in the 30% of total cost range. Doesn't have to be. We could dial it up more than that. Because this is not a non-BPA program, we can do whatever we want and kind of customize how we do it. And we've done it before where we've put it up pretty high and then checked out what the uptake rates are, and then dial it back down if it's super popular. Then it's like, wow, we may be giving more than we need. That's the downside of not having the BPA piece. BPA does all of that industry work on all of our BPA programs, so we know exactly why that level of incentive is being authorized, and all of that. So that's work done regionally. When we have our own programs, we do a little bit more trial and error, honestly, and we talk to our trade allies and kind of gauge and use our history of BPA stuff and grab what we think is appropriate to help us develop that program.
So I have some questions about this, but I don't want to get too deeply in the weeds. So on it, because, but I guess just to put a pin in it, something to think about for the future. There may be an opportunity to look for some forms of cost recovery, so that we can generate kind of a revolving fund on this. If there's in fact a savings to the consumer on a month-to-month basis from the greater efficiency of the heat pump water heater versus the slightly higher cost of natural gas, I assume, but I don't know. The question would really be, and not for you to answer now, Adam, is do we know the economics of it, whether there is that savings going on, and if we can then, if there is, then there may be an opportunity to structure some cost recovery over some longer term, so that we have some revenue coming back to refuel the program.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and we can talk more about that. We have to always average those out because it depends on what it's replacing as well. So, and again, that's the benefit of the BPA side of things. We get hamstrung, with their requirements. They've done so much research and have all those calculations done for us. That's the good side of it. But no, that's good stuff, and that will be an element of how we, what we want to justify, honestly, for what kind of a level of incentive to put. So we'll do some of that, and we can pass it by you.
So there's no incentive for just electric. It has to be a heat pump.
We already have electric efficiency because that's part of our BPA programming. So this is something that that isn't part of our BPA, because in electric, if somebody has an electric water heater and want to heat pump water heater, we already have a program. And so we'll use that, you know, as part of our information. But if somebody's going from gas to electric, BPA doesn't pay for that. It's only for energy efficient, you know, electricity savings or efficiency savings. So that's the difference of what BPA, you know, what they don't cover. They don't cover any sort of fuel switching stuff because it's not in there. It's not required by the, you know, the power plan.
Question, Adam, is there a single document or source that kind of details all of these incentive programs at any given time?
There is, you know, we have kind of our own documents for kind of the most used of our incentives, but the BPA implementation manual is the annual document that we are involved in regionally to when it makes changes. That is kind of the Bible for all of the possible, you know, BPA programming. That includes stuff that we don't use very often or not at all. The ag sector that might be used up on the Columbia, you know, Columbia Gorge area. We do use a lot of those for commercial. We don't really promote a certain program for commercial because it really depends on what they've got. So we audit it, find out what they're doing, and then match it up with our implementation manual. So what we have normally out for handouts is our most common residential programs, but it's not the exhaustive everything we have, because but that's available. If you want to look at the implementation manual, I could definitely get it out to you.
Please.
You bet. And then the first question, or the first, Rick, I think was clean fuels credit question.
Yes.
So I may not have the answer to, I'm not exactly sure what that Transportation Commission element to that was. If it had to do with bike share or e-bike or anything like that, that's possible, but I'm not positive. But I can give you a general update for clean fuels is we have been, you know, looking for, you know, we need a buyer. We need to monetize it. So to monetize those credits, there are different ways that can be done. And we have basically placed our ad on the exchange, and no takers right now, which wasn't surprising. What the typical way is brokers who aggregate, you know, and buy up a bunch, aggregate it and sell. So we have made the rounds now and have what Stu and I think, it just happened yesterday, got him right before he left on vacation, kind of reviewing a particular broker that I think we will likely be able to transact these with. So we're looking like we will be seeing those credits monetized somewhere in November.
Yes.
And it's a rate per credit that's pretty good. You know, they take, obviously there is a fee for their efforts, but it's out of the several that we looked at, we have one that we think is really good. They're only doing it if they are our broker for a multi-year. So we're just making sure that we're okay with a multi-year thing and see what it would look like if it was just a one-timer, if it changes a lot in what they would offer. It may or may not. So that's what we're kind of figuring out right now. It's just that last little details, and then we'll monetize those and they become then a supplemental budget. And then we look at how we appropriate them. And there'll be you know, some discussions about that. We'll put some internal proposals together, you know, and ultimately that's a council decision on the appropriations.
Right. So from the note, it seems like coordinating a little bit with the Transportation Commission, because they apparently have ideas on how to spend those, is a useful thing to do.
I will check in with Scott, Public Works Director, and see what ideas they have for that money that comes from the electric fund.
Okay. Elizabeth?
So I do have the motion. It was kind of vague in terms of like what exact programs, but they essentially say ensure clean fuel program revenues are exclusively reinvested in transportation projects which create additional clean fuel credits, increase electrification, and or support the city's climate energy action plan transportation goals. So if it's nothing like super specific. I think they just kind of wanted to voice support of, please don't take it out of the SEEP stuff. So
good. That seems consistent with most of, the council conversation. I think there was the question was, is it restricted or required to be reinvested a certain way? Is there a tight nexus to it? Which I always assumed when they first did the program that there would be, and lo and behold, there isn't. That is a job that I will advocate that it's smart to keep it a tight nexus, and of course, Tanya can carry the torch from there about how we want to use that. And obviously, there's an ROI case to be made for the electric utility aside from just the conceptual principle of the nexus. There's some smart economics involved with that too. So I hope that stays true. And I like Transportation Commission's recommendation kind of keeps that in that same frame of reference too. So that's good.
Anya?
Yeah, so I guess my question is just what process-wise, what is going to need to be done at council in the next couple months? And I can certainly talk to Adam about that, on the side, but it seems like this is one of those places where your liaison is looking to shepherd a decision-making process. And I would just want to make sure that this commission is also putting forward very clearly what the goal is for these monies. So right now the council has something from the Transportation Commission, but it's going to be important that this commission is weighing in and, with whatever we think the plan should be for those monies. So whatever that looks like, Adam, maybe you and I can just, talk offline about what that timing might be and what we think those actual steps are going to be.
Yeah, and I could give it my off the cuff thoughts is probably, to this group in January and to council either in February or March, because we'll have a clump of supplementals to do. We usually don't do all these supplementals one by one. There's a lot of them. So, but we'll want to do those supplementals before we get into the meat of budget season, so we can record those and they're in there. So that'd be my just order of operations. I think that's probably how it would go. And that gives us the time from November until we bring it to you all in January for the staff side to put together what we think, the best package looks like.
Great, thank you.
There is a point further on in the agenda where we talk about what we want to do with council, and the clean fuel credits is one of the things that I wanted to bring up at that time. So if there's more discussion, I'd like to save it for that. Julian, did you have something else that you wanted to?
The only question I had is, do you know, as a guess, when the transportation plan is likely to get voted on, the final vote for it?
Transportation
system plan, which was the original, the transportation system plan, I believe is the proper name for it, but it's, right. Gary Schaff had done a lot of work to try and set up a downtown bicycle program to change the way that the traffic flows around through the downtown area, and all of that process got pushed into 2021. But I'm curious if you have a sense of when the final vote might be and what the timeline for that is. Maybe you're going to talk about that later. I guess I don't know. I
don't right now have an answer to that. I can get you back an answer though. I'll take a note on when the TSP, what the timeline that Scott has for it.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, maybe you could move on to a summary of what Steve might have said.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, I won't do it any justice, but I think, one of the things that, and I meet with him pretty regularly. He does a lot of economic development work. We're both on the So Ready board of directors, Southern Oregon Regional Economic Development. He does a lot of work with the Angel Network for entrepreneurs in the Valley. So I kind of have a long history related to that. That's barely a Vista. I mean, it's a Vista in that realm, not in the traditional realm, but he was also on the board of Earth Advantage. So I worked with him when he was on the board there. So one of the areas, and I would assume that the group probably is aware, that he does a better job of explaining it. It took a legislative action last session for the gas utility to even entertain the idea of bringing in the landfill gas from Dry Creek into the distribution system. And so that last legislative action opened the door for the PUC changes that allowed Avista to, I think, be able to rate base it. I'm not positive if they're going to go that route. They're limited in what capital investments go on to rates and what capital investments go on to kind of a tariff program or protected, insulated from ratepayers. And so that was the legislative stuff. And again, he's better at it, obviously, than I am to describe it. But that unlocked the concept. It made it actually possible to do. It was legislatively not permissible for landfill gas to come in and have a capital investment from a natural gas utility that was part of their rate making model. So long story short on that one is that Avista is working with Dry Creek, Rogue Disposal parent. I'm not sure what the parent company name is, but Rogue Disposal owns Dry Creek. And Steve is very hopeful, and he has pushed. I think it'll be the first in Avista territory to have that landfill gas, if the capital expense is approved, to connect the dots there into the infrastructure where there would be renewable gas flowing. And again, I don't know what the model will be. The early idea was that somebody, kind of like the Blue Skies program, where a customer would raise their hand and say, "Hey, I want that good stuff. I want the local renewable component of that." And obviously, it's mixed into the system. You're not getting your own pipeline of renewable landfill gas, but you are signing up and saying, "I'm willing to pay the extra 2%, 5%, whatever the tariff amount would be." I think that the legislative change opens the door to it not having to be a tariff base like that, but that's something for Steve to talk about with you all when he comes. But and that gets to what I know Stu has talked about before, of how what do you do with this infrastructure, this distribution infrastructure, if you say no more fossil style? What else can be? How do you not just abandon that infrastructure and use it for something that has an improved product line through it? And this is a small piece, but it's a piece that 50% or more, I think 52, 53% of the methane from the landfill is still being flared, and so it captures it. And the original idea was, and the city participated in the study, was to convert that to fleet fuel. So you didn't put it into the distribution system. You replaced diesel or gas. And we sent all of our fleet information, and so did 10 other cities, and they were looking at it. We got the Valley got a Clean Cities grant to look at it. Ultimately didn't pencil. The bigger players didn't go that route. So this is the second run at better utilization of methane from the landfill that is currently being flared. The other 40, almost 50%, runs through a generator and goes into Pacific Power's system. So that is a component, I know, of what Steve wanted to talk about, what that legislative unlocking did, and what Avista is planning for that project. And again, I don't know the timeline, how quickly that runs, but that is in the works.
Okay, so probably we should just wait for him to get into all the rest of this, but just to be clear, the notion was for him to come and give us an overview, not just what's happening in Southern Oregon, but overall what Avista is planning to do in order to address climate change.
Yeah, I think he's prepared for that, and I wasn't going to get into.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting.
I'm not going to speak for Avista. But
Exactly.
yes, he's aware of that, and I think he'll have some good stuff.
Yeah, and if they have any specific plans for where they supply both electricity and gas for cities, somewhat similar to Ashland, and what they're doing in that situation, that might provoke some thinking about what to do in this situation where currently all they can do is lose business.
Yeah, they do that currently, I think, only in Spokane. They're the electric utility in Spokane. I don't know that they have any other jurisdictions where they're a dual, but
Well, they have quite a wide service area that's both electric and gas. It's not just the city of Spokane. Anyway, Julian, I think you were raising your hand.
No, yeah, that's okay. The question was answered.
Okay, and then I think Bob.
Yeah, I was just asked, when we do get that presentation, I hope that he was also going to tell us a bit more about Vista in Ashland, and not just about climate change, but what is their custom, how many connections do they have here in Ashland? What's the sort of consumption of natural gas in Ashland? So we can just get just an overview of that, unless there's some other place that we can go to get that information without him telling us.
We get some of that in an aggregate amount, probably the same level that he would give you here, but we get that as part of our franchise, payments.
Nice.
So we get it, I think, on quarterly, and then Stu has done some work to get some historical stuff for our GHG inventory work. So we do get data from them. There is a certain point at which they stop and don't give us anything, more granular from a customer standpoint. But
Sure.
I'm sure he has some slides that'll have that. But this is good stuff just to verify that that's what he's going to cover. So appreciate it.
Okay, so if there are no more questions for Adam substituting for Steve, I think we ought to move on. The next thing on the agenda is commissioner recruitment. We still have several open slots, 2 students and 1 citizen commissioner. I'm not sure how to refer to that slot. And Tanya, I think you had taken on to make some connections about that at the prior meeting.
Yeah, so I reached out to the high school student who had contacted me in the spring and was interested in it when Xander was done with his term. And I reached out and he said he had decided to do something else. So we're still needing to recruit a high school student. And then I am sending information into SOU through a couple of contacts, but anybody who has any specific contacts either at SOU or the high school, please let me know. I do have some other contacts at the high school, so I'll make sure that I get that information out to them. But I think as widely as we can distribute it at SOU, the better. So what I'm sending out is simply, a link to the commission on the website, along with a link to the application form. So Elizabeth had sent that over to me a bit ago, where you can fill out the application form online. So that's what I'm doing. And then we still have the 3rd seat, the sort of the general seat. And I think it's important for us to be looking at all of these seats in terms also of just getting some more diversity on the commission.
So
Yeah, Bob.
So I just to report, I was approached by somebody just for a conversation about the work of the Climate Policy Commission, somebody who had gone through the Master Climate Protector class with SOCAN, and was interested in whether it might be a good fit for her to apply to the CPC. So I had that conversation with her. She may be watching today. I don't know if we've got any viewers, but I had suggested to her that because we have a meeting today, she might want to sit in.
Her is a good word.
Jeff? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I did a lunchtime seminar at SOU at the Department of Environmental Science a year or so ago, and I'll follow up with the professor there because there may be some leads in that department.
So the student can be high school or college?
One of each. I have a name, Cadden Gallagher. Do you know if that was the high school student that was already referred to, Tanya? No? Elizabeth?
I believe that was a university student that Stu had talked to. So we could probably
okay.
follow up with Stu once he gets back.
Okay. Okay. So let's all keep reaching out to people. And now let's move on to the vice chair election. So I thought about this a bit. The duties for this are to preside when the chair is not there. And I personally would also like whoever is the vice chair to work with me on forming the agendas. And so my intention is for keeping focus for myself on the utilities section, because I've already done a lot of background work on that. So my preference would be somebody from the built environment, just because it makes it easier to do all the communication. So be consistently available, and if you have some experience with forming agendas and leading meetings and stuff like that, that would be great. So are there any nominations?
I'm happy to do it.
Okay. So, as I recall, we need a second for that.
Second.
Any discussion? Other nominations?
I think it's a great idea.
Having a vice chair? Yeah, that is a great idea. Okay. Elizabeth?
You guys can just vote now to approve Julian, if that's okay.
I think Ray raised his hand, and then Jeff, and then Bob.
Oh, I thought we were voting.
Oh, yeah, no, she's suggesting I should call for that. I hadn't actually done it yet. Okay, well, if there's no more discussion, then let's take a vote. All in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
You're on.
Hey, Rick, I just had a quick add to the previous agenda item. I just looked up at the code section for the CPC. It doesn't have to be one of each. It can be, you have flexibility. There's the way it's written, it could be 2 high school or 1 of each or 2 college. So in case you're, just gives you more flexibility.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so now let's move on to the focus areas.
Just a comment, I could also reach out to SOU. I know that one of the teachers in the environmental program there.
That'd be great. We should all do all the outreach that we can and fill that slot. It would be most useful if they're interested in working in the utility section, because that's where we lost the member. Okay, so the rest of the agenda is arranged so that we are setting context and then having a discussion of what we're going to do in the future in the Electrifying Ashland program. So that's why things are arranged the way that they are. Also, whatever existing momentum we might have, I didn't want to put a stop to that while we were debating about what the future might look like. So with that, let's go to administration and planning, which is subcommittee alternatives. There was a memo from Elizabeth about this. And I presume that you are all familiar with it. So I would just like to take it open for discussion. Unless Elizabeth, you want to have any preliminary comments?
Well, let me see if I understood it right. Can we meet at less than a quorum. It's not a public meeting. Can we have a discussion with another commission member as long as we keep it below the quorum?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I don't know how much conversation I want to rile this up at all, but you know, the subcommittee format, while it makes some logical sense, I think in structure from the public meetings law and what all is required to do along with that, I think what has happened in many commissions is exactly what Ray just said. Is you know, there is no, you don't form subcommittees, you don't form groups, you just have, you can informally have several people that are gravitating to one particular topic area or not. It's kind of this, it's really weird is how do you stay true to the public, you know, transparency, but how do you also functionally get along without having to do all of the administrative work and the noticing and the where you have to meet and all of that kind of the burden that comes along with the transparency part. So, you know, it's not uncommon at all in many commissions where you know, you can have anything less than a quorum of the overall commission can get together and talk. Once you've formed subcommittees and named people for subcommittees, you've now triggered the public meetings law. So it depends on how organic you want to be versus structured you want to be. But I think, Ray, that what you've talked about while we're in COVID is at least two of you getting together, whether you're, you know, kind of formally on any of your self-assigned, you know, subcommittees or not, is completely fine. But having a meeting of the subcommittee, you know, then triggers a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, except, and we don't have subcommittees anymore, so we can't. So by definition, we can't have a meeting of a subcommittee. We don't, because they don't exist.
Right, we only have focus areas now. So it does sound like it's possible then, though, to still have people who are sort of assigned as the lead of different topics for agenda preparation, right? So so-and-so is going to, you know, do what they can between now and the next meeting to bring information back on a particular topic. That's right. That's okay, right?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, and then that person can meet, as long as they stay under the quorum, they can talk to whoever they need to talk to.
Yeah, that's a functional equivalent. And actually, Bob, you say it that way. You know, it's for total legal clarity that our city attorney would like. I suppose you could, you know, have a motion to, you know, temporarily, you know, until further notice, suspend, you know, your subcommittees, and then you can have 2, 3, or 4 people meet together. You know, it can be private. I think the practical thing that I think is important is, you know, are things happening within those conversations that are probably, you know, better suited to be, you know, available to all. And I think the research and just like Tanya said, the research stuff and the organizing and coordinating and making sure nobody's duplicating each other's stuff and you're kind of Q&A updating each other, you know, that all is fine and doesn't need to be that ultimate, you know, public records and public meeting law stuff. So, you know, every commission kind of navigates it a little differently, and our job is to make sure we understand where the stuff just from a straight face test, you know, should be flipped over to that public meetings law intent. So what you guys just described, and if we wanted to do, you know, a motion to temporarily suspend them just for clarity, you know, we could do it. I don't think it's necessary, probably, but if there's any concern from anyone, that would probably help be clean. And then you could, 6 months from now or whenever we have the staffing room and all the things back flowing, you could, you know, remove your temporary suspension.
I guess the flip side of that would be we can do what you just said, but anything that is a decision making where we think the public should be involved, we should bring it to this meeting and make the decision there.
That's always the case, regardless of subcommittees aren't a decision making. They're bringing information back to the full group who's making a recommendation to the council. Decision making is, you know, the next level up.
Jeff?
I would make a motion that we suspend that the Climate Policy Commission suspend the committee
Subcommittee.
the subcommittee structure until further notice.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for the memo. That was very clear.
Okay, so I think we move on to commission constraints. I just wanted to, I've been thinking about how it is we're going to move forward, and I wanted to have some discussion, particularly with Adam here, but Tanya as well, about how we can actually make progress. Because it appears to me that we have several significant constraints. The council doesn't have a whole lot of time to deal with the issues that we like to bring with them. We have very little meeting time, and staff is extremely busy. So one of the things that would be useful, particularly to talk about while Adam is here, is what items in the SEEP the staff feel they already have sufficient direction from council to move forward on. And I just want to bring that up as a context item rather than for Adam to try to list them all. And as we get through the rest of the meeting, I'd like to have that in mind, that when we prioritize things, we'd be thinking about those three constraints and trying to focus on things which we can actually accomplish even with those constraints.
So as I understand it, based on where the SEEP is up to, or based on the SEEP as it's currently written, and based on City Council, there's no sort of a step-by-step plan in place to do anything additionally about climate change one way or another, other than for what we are bringing forward, I believe. Is that correct?
If that's a question to me, no, I don't think so. I think I think there's a lot of things, as Rick was saying, there's a lot of things in there that we're doing. That's flat out, part of our existing jobs, tasks. We have programs already established that we're working on. To me, a lot of the SEEP is a lot of what we want to do, and then the question is the how part. How much, how fast, how then how expensive, and all those kind of things. The how, and Rick and I talked a little bit about this last week, is there's some of the how does rise to policy level decision making from the council, for sure. Some of the how is staff level operational things that are already that don't have a policy need, and that's really a benefit of having the SEEP. That's one of the inherent benefits of having the SEEP at all, is that it generally provides a lot of cover, a lot of guidance for that's just what we do. Either we incorporate it into things that we are bringing to the council otherwise, or we are able to just do it. The EV charging, expansion of the EV charging stuff. If we have appropriations in our budgets and we have opportunity and we have the staffing, I manage, with Stu, I manage his, kind of prioritization of time and what we're working on, and we can just get those things done. So it's not everything will need to go to council to get accomplished, but clearly there are some that either from the staff side, we would say that's not the order that we have things laid out in. So if you want that put at the very top, maybe that is something that, it's a little different now that I'm kind of wearing the dual hat of a city administrator. I can kind of help prioritize some of these things that I otherwise in the past had to convince other people of. I just have to convince myself, or Stu only has to convince me, which, I hope is an asset for this stuff, because I definitely have lived and breathed this stuff, and was a contributing author to the document. I put a few things in there that I felt particularly strongly about. So that to me is the answer, Julian, to that question. Is some of the things are going to be for sure. Yep, that's a policy question that can't really, not much can happen without council providing direction, either in dollars, in staff resources, especially if it's staff resources that are with another department. I can still navigate those again now, but because oftentimes it isn't that council needs to say yes to it. They need to be okay with what doesn't get done instead. And that's a lot of what we have is, okay, if we're going to do a comp plan thing as an example, council would need to know that, and that's something that I as a city administrator would say, I think we need to talk to council about it, because that might mean 2 housing items legislatively that the community development department can't get done until later. You know, so a lot of it is those kind of things. If it bumps up against other council, approved and expected things, then we have to talk to council about resorting and rejuggling things. But there's a lot of them that are just by themselves don't need it. It's useful to have a communication with council to describe what's going on, FYI kind of stuff. And that's kind of a combination between the commission and the staff liaison and me to try and help, navigate those that are just FYIs. So there's a whole mixture, and I guess they don't automatically sort themselves into these categories I'm describing. They're kind of dependent on the situation, on budgets, and on what other departments might be involved. And if they trigger any particular, for lack of a better word, hot buttons.
Okay, well, so I guess my point being mostly council is whatever, it's our responsibility to bring policy decisions to the city council. Nobody else is going to be doing that. So so it's really the list that we have already generated that we're working with. And it's probably the subset of that list that you think are issues that rise to the level of requiring a policy decision by the council. And that list, I think, once you've gone through those screens, is maybe 4 items. And it strikes me that it would be worth at least bringing them in front of the council before the end of the year so that they at least know what they are. The council is going to be substantially different come the new year, but even so, getting the items in front of the council so that somebody at least has some awareness of them and has a bit of a chance to think about them even in the back of their mind, it seems to me is worth doing. And putting the comp plan into the city's, putting the SEEP into the city's comprehensive land use management plan, the small engine landscaping equipment phase out, the hot water heater ordinance that we were working on, and maybe the transportation system or the transportation plan to be updated or modified so as to make Ashland more bicycle friendly are maybe the 4 top things on my list. And the built environment work group or the built environment group isn't the only group that has these priorities, but at least for me, I can say that I would like to see those things in front of the council at some level before the end of the year.
Yeah, and I guess it's a question for the group and also maybe for Tanya to weigh in as a member of the council. I think having them come in as an FY and awareness might have some utility and some value. When they're not provided, when staff isn't able to provide them with context about how they nest with what's going on, where they are in a timeline, what are the pros and cons of those. If it's just the commission saying that, I'm not sure. It probably has, like I say, some value. What I would say in those 4 that you listed, I think some of those council doesn't have a lot to do with that if they don't have the other staff wrapping around it. The staff content that goes with it. The TSP part, I'm not certain that if it makes sense or not to go to council for awareness, but that process, which I'll provide you all with the update of where that's going in the process to say, I don't know what they would do with it. I guess it's all a matter of understanding what council would do with what you're bringing to them. And if there's enough there for them to do something, then it probably is valuable. If there's not yet enough there to do something with, then the question is awareness alone worthy of doing that? And that's more of a study session versus a business meeting. But I don't know if that helps or not, but I'd be interested in, in Tanya's take on, as the receiver of all of that information, how is it best put into context and usable for the decision-making body?
Well, it seems to me that it would be worth just, I mean, there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem with it, right? Like, is it the council's responsibility first or staff's responsibility first, or who knows? It seems like we keep having the same lack of a decision one way or another. And it would seem to be worth taking those things in front of the council so the council could at least say, yes, go ahead and work on these things.
Well, we've been trying to get some focus to this, and some of the things that you mentioned were not on the things that I think we agreed to in August. And in any event, I think we need to be specific about what it is that we're going to do and have the entire commission buy into whatever that is. And so I don't want to deepen on this particular list right now. I would like to hear from Tanya if she has something to say about it.
So I think what we know is that we're already halfway through October. There will be one more meeting in October. There will be one meeting in November, and potentially one or 1.5-ish kind of meetings in December. What we're going to see as this time progresses is the council less and less willing to make decisions as we get to the end of the year and we're in the middle of the transition to the new council. And because there is so much turnover coming, we know that there are 3 seats turning over on the council. I think one of the things we might think about is there's always this time period between when someone is elected and when they actually begin their service. It's about 2 months. And it seems to me that we might better use our time by making sure we're really clear as a commission about what we're coming forward into the new council with, and then to try to meet with the people who are coming onto council to get them oriented to the SEEP and understanding kind of what is underway, so that when this commission comes back with staff sometime early in the year, they're oriented and they kind of know where we're at and they're up and sort of ready to move. That would be my recommendation, because I think it's either that or else we have to somehow duplicate effort, because again, you're going to have 3 new people who won't necessarily have been part of the conversation that you have if you have it this year. And so that becomes, I think, a difficulty. But I think anytime that there's an election, this commission should be looking at reaching out to any new folks and kind of helping them get up to speed, because it's a huge lift when a counselor comes on new, because there are so many things that are in stream that they have to kind of step into the middle of. So that's what I would recommend.
Just maybe tag on real quick to the one thing you said. I think that's important. I hope glues together what I was talking about is when you say, council decisions, and you're right, there's less and less decisions this last bit. And that's a key kind of filter for what goes to council. If it goes to council, it needs to go to council, probably, it's either for, what is the purpose of going to council? And if it's for a decision, then it, in my role on the agenda making and the packet development and reviewing what comes from various departments and staff is to make sure that all the content is in there for the decision maker to make a good decision. And that's the part that not a struggle, but it's a reminder in all of our commissions, is to have something be slotted in a timeline that says, okay, here's what the commission has done and we want it on this meeting, and there's not adequate time in between for staff has to be able to put information, augment that material so that there is a complete set of information for a decision maker to make, as a group, to make a decision. And so that probably, I feel like, is some of the rub, is that there is a need and maybe it's not built into the process of the calendaring, where staff has to have some time to also put their information together. Otherwise, stuff is going to go to council that isn't going to have a complete set, or is going to be at the meeting, insufficient information probably to make a decision, or potentially at least.
Ray?
I think a heads up to the council annually should be done when we do the commission presentation to the council. And then after that, anything we bring forward should have the work done, as Adam said, so that the council can make a decision.
Okay, Julian, I think you had your hand up next.
So that's, I mean, it sounds like it would be a lot of work. I mean, the list that I have isn't necessarily the definitive list of the whole group, but I mean, even just the list that I have sounds like it would be a lot of time on your part to organize, or to organize all the background information. And do you not need approval from council to go ahead and put that amount of your time into that process of organizing that information?
And that's the, I think the issue of what you're asking council for. And that's the conversation that we need to have prior to sending something to council is, are we looking for, is that, if it's not in agreement with staff, if it's not already in our pipeline or fitting with what we're doing already, and it's something that if council, the commission wants to do, and asking council to tell the city administrator to make it happen and resort what the departments are doing, that still is some work on our end to say, okay, how is it going to get done? What is all involved in getting it done? And what doesn't get done instead? So that then is it's a decision of sorts. It's a work plan and a direction back to the administrator to then resort and rejuggle the playing field. So that's where I think there's some value in having alignment between what staff is working on and what the commission wants to see done. And I think there are some areas where there is alignment there, and we need to, if we can match those up and then look at what's left over, what's an outlier to that. And if the commission still feels strongly about that, that then becomes something that goes forward to the council. And then I can, as administrator, say, here's why it isn't being done yet and why we didn't just go ahead and do it. And then we can finish out that conversation with council and like I say, resort and rejuggle the resources as necessary.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you kind of lost me with all that. So the council.
Hang on, Julian. I think deep ending on this is not really going to help us very much. So do you have some particular question that's not generic background? Because I think this might become a lot more clear once we start working through examples.
I'm trying to get to the point of working through an example.
And later on in this agenda, we will be doing exactly that. So Bob, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, yeah, I just wanted to kind of complementary to this. It strikes me that there's, what I've heard is that there are some things that have to go before council in order to actually move forward with the implementation of the SEEP, and that's what we're talking about. There are other things, many other things that can be done by the city staff itself and don't require a blessing from the council because they've already blessed it with the SEEP itself, is what I'm hearing. It strikes me that there's some utility. What that means, I think, is often those things that happen by the staff themselves are invisible to the rest of the people of Ashland, or not invisible, but they're not as visible as they might otherwise be if they go before the council and they're presented as something with a big splash and there's an article in the newspaper, and it really has to be an extra deliberate effort to make Ashlanders aware of the things that the city staff are doing to implement the SEEP, just because it's part of their jobs at this point. So I think it would be useful to keep that in mind and also find a way to communicate that. And I know that Stu is working on a website that's going to help to track some of the things that were some progress against the implementation of the SEEP. Hopefully that will take some of the burden of that communication to the rest of Ashland, because, you know, frankly, a lot of people in Ashland don't think the city's implementing the SEEP very much, or they're not so aware of it.
Well, and one of the things that's going on is that we have made some progress on integrating the SEEP into the comprehensive plan, and that's something that's already part of staff's workload, and so it has integrated fairly well. So I don't want to forget that that has happened, and that we actually have a section of this agenda to come back to that. So absent anything else that's actually, I want to just move on. I don't think that we're going to be productive talking in generalities anymore. And the next item on the agenda is actually the council CPC meeting. At various prior meetings that we had, we developed a recommendation subset. In retrospect, I should have prepared a memo to remind you all of what they are. So I will list them off as quickly as I can. There's direct staff to collaborate with CPC to develop a comprehensive electric and gas utility plan with planning starting November 1st. Direct staff in collaboration with the Climate Policy and Conservation and Climate Outreach Commissions to develop an outreach and engagement campaign for SEEP. Direct staff to build an existing internal science-based climate education efforts for annual staff training by June 30th, 2021, and prioritize SEEP and climate knowledge in hiring management positions. In one of our prior meetings, we went through this list and we did some word polishing, and that is still pending out there. My recollection is that Tanya was going to find out, or some combination of Tanya and Adam, decide when this can actually go to council. And so the point of having this on the agenda tonight is to just raise it again. Where are we?
So I have not moved on that particular piece since we met last time. We had this sort of truncated time between our meetings, and so I have not had a chance to talk to Adam about that yet. But I'm feeling like maybe this is, because there is some decision making in this. There's some chart setting or some course setting with it, that it might make sense to sort of include this in whatever we bring to the new council in the new year. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to maybe have a chance to either write something up or come back to another one of your meetings and kind of have a conversation about those four, you know, to make sure I'm understanding exactly the level of detail you're talking about. Because again, some of those, I think, depending upon what you're looking for as outcomes, may not need a whole lot of council. I mean, the fourth one, to prioritize the climate, you know, we've incorporated that as, to me, that functions mainly at the department head and city manager level is where that item lies. I'd like to have some conversation and maybe even bring in Tina, our HR, Administrative Services HR Director, to talk about how we would do that. That's more operational, I believe. I want to make sure. The comprehensive electric plan, that one has been slowed down by, you know, multiple crises within the city. We're you know, operating pretty differently, but I still think we have, you know, I would like to propose how we see that integrating before that goes to council. Again, I don't know that it needs necessarily to go to council. You know, we have ways, especially with the clean fuels credit. I mean, it weaves in to the funds available from clean fuels, possibly. I'd like to have that conversation with you all. So, you know, it'd be great, and maybe that's just next month, if you're willing, that's an agenda item where we can kind of map that out for you all, what those four, you know, what the options are for those four and the pros and cons, because there's always multiple pathways for how we make progress on these things. And, you know, and again, you all have a recommendation role to the council, but if your recommendation is already the same as what we are planning to do, then, you know, check, moot point, we're off and running, and you acknowledge and are supporting the plan that we already have for it. If not, if we have something where we need to, move things around or do something different, then we can talk about what that would look like to council. But it may not need as much. So
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so basically we started meeting again in August, and now it's September and October, and now it's proposed that CPC take this back up again in November. And so this isn't making quick progress. So,
Well, let's see if there's a way to deal with some of this administratively, because it is true that those things are in the SEEP. We just haven't necessarily seen them actualized in operations. Is why we've highlighted them. And so it makes sense to me that if there's a way to do it just with the staff picking it up and moving on it, because they've already been given the direction from the SEEP to do that, then we don't need to sort of use up our time in front of the council on those items. But I think that we could come to a final decision in November on those things based on a conversation, maybe invite Tina in, see what that timeline would be, see if we can sort of come to an agreement on what that looks like. And then we might not need to take all or some of those in front of the council.
I would tell you, I agree. I think it'd be great. We're doing, what we do is when we have opportunities to integrate what is being talked about at any commission or council, we just start integrating those. When they're brand new and we have to come out of nowhere and devote new staff resources and pull them from their jobs to work on them and then bring them in, that's a different conversation. But the training one is probably, out of those four, is the one that I probably have some capacity, just flat out capacity concerns with. We are being asked to have training in a multitude of topics and categories, and we literally have zero training budgets, and we have zero time for staff to do that. I guess I can give my big kind of my spiel is we are running way understaffed. We have staff that is still trying to juggle, at the operational level up to the top level, that is, working part-time, that we can't say no to that. They are allowed to work part-time for COVID issues and for remote schooling and all that when they have kids at home. We have we're down to 235 total employees. We were at a peak in 2009 of 264. So we are thin. So we are being asked to do similar things over a lot of different categories. And so the magic in it all is how to nest them all in and how to have everybody be okay-ish with the order of operations. Because it's not a willingness issue. It's how do you fit all of these wildfire related things, emergency preparedness related, SEEP related, all of the layers of very important things we have going on, how do we fit them all in? And it's a lot of the same staff that is involved there's not a whole lot of different staff. You're not going to see a whole lot of different faces come out of nowhere. It's department heads and their number twos usually that are responsible for making this happen. Now they assign specific working elements probably, but that's the group. And that group is also now doing a lot of regional stuff in regional recovery on housing and economic recovery for the region, environmental stuff, and a variety of other things. So again, I guess the tone is, it's not a lack of willingness or interest. It's fitting this all into the matrix of capacity.
And I think that if I can break in for just a sec, I think that we probably, when we lean back in our chairs and think about it, understand all the difficulties that we're all facing right now. But as I was mentioning in the constraints earlier, staff time is one of the constraints. And so finding out those things for which staff time is already allocated, or you can see some way to break staff time free, is probably what is one of the things that we need to use as a filter, so that we're not doing things that get put on the shelf so long they turn out to be useless.
Right.
Okay, so with that, unless somebody feels they just have to say something more about this, I think I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda. Does anybody object to that?
I just want to clarify then, are we asking Adam to have Tina come and talk with us about specifically the HR element that we have on that list? Are we looking to decide that?
I didn't hear a decision made. What I would prefer to do is for Julian and I, as part of the agenda formation, to figure that out.
Okay, yeah, but it would be good for us to figure out a path for this in November.
Yep.
So, okay, yep, I'm good with that then.
And
So the question is, will staff direct themselves to have more training in climate preparedness or climate operationalization?
I need to know what that means, I guess. That's part of the conversation is, what are the expectations of this group and what does that look like? So yeah, it's hard for me to answer that. I don't know what that means necessarily.
Well, I don't know what it means either. I mean, you told me that you don't have any bandwidth for additional training. So if we were to ask you to do additional training, something else would have to go away, right?
Right. And we have mandatory trainings, and we have, yeah. I can provide some comments back on that if you'd like, but I would like to know what that means, where that, what the group, what's the objective? What are we trying to accomplish with that? What is the end piece of that? Is there a deficiency somewhere that we're trying to correct? What is it?
Well, it sounds like basically something that you can't do anyway. And so I would personally scrap.
No, it depends what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should have a conversation at the next meeting where we go into a little bit more detail so that it's clearer. We can get information from staff about what those existing channels might look like and what our ideas are. When you say training, some people think it's a day-long, leave your work environment type thing. It could be a variety of things, and it could be different things for different levels of employees. So I think it makes sense to get more clear about what we think would be helpful for the city, and then to find out what, with staff, and to see if there's some way to move some of this forward in spite of the constraints.
Right. So as part of the agenda formation, I'd like for,
Yeah.
now, Tanya, I'm going to include you in this. Julia and Tanya and I will put some effort into this as part of organizing for the next meeting. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So then I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, comprehensive master and capital improvement plans. Ray, I think you were going to lead a discussion on this.
Sure. We've been focusing pretty much on 4 plans that are under Public Works. So remember in August, we did the water master plan. And now I've been looking at the TAP master plan and provided some input prior to the council presentation last Monday. And then on the horizon, we've got the storm and the water management and conservation plan in the next biennium. And then also at the last meeting, sticking with water, there was some discussion if we should give some input to the pool plan for parks. Getting back to the TAP, Scott already put in some language since we had gone through this on our water master plan relative to conserving greenhouse gases or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, because what we're primarily concerned about in these plans is reducing emissions as well as conservation and understanding what the future holds. So the TAP will come back to the council later. One of the main things I've found missing in the TAP, and as well, we've asked for that to be put in the water management and conservation plan, is a climate study. So again, we're trying to get that done by 2023, because in reviewing the TAP, there's a 65 expected % increase in the use, I think through 2070. And we really need to see where those water sources assumptions are going to be verified. And so it's not only for the Ashland watershed, but also for the watershed that provides the water for the TAP. So I think there's 3 plans that can make use of that climate study, our water, our TAP, the water management and conservation, as well as the storm. So that'd be the 4th one, because the storm plan makes assumptions on the amount of rainfall, sort of a 25-year event in terms of maximum rainfall to understand if our storm sizing is correct. So I think that is a big item. I'd like to see that we'll probably need some approval from council for that. If there's not money we can pull out of the normal planning process to get that work done. And it could be something that takes 6 months to do as well. So that's it for where we are with Public Works. I think the next one, we need to decide if we need to give any input to pool. That was one of the agenda items we had coming out of the last meeting. And then after that, I think it's the focus will be your next agenda item, which is the electric master plan.
Right. So what would be helpful for me, Stu generated a whole list of, trying to be a comprehensive list of all the plans that you might want to affect. And I haven't yet seen it with the dates attached. And I think you were going to review it, prioritize and that kind of thing. So if for the next meeting, you could provide that written feedback, that would help a lot.
Yeah, let me see if I can get the soft copy of the table Stu had, so I'm not starting from zero, and update that with sort of our priority, what we're working on, and some dates. And again, this is an item that is, these items are part of the SEEP. We don't need council approval to incorporate the SEEP wording into them, and we try to just work with the timing that staff has already allocated for this.
Yeah, Adam?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, it's kind of a comment slash question for Ray. I assume Scott, before when you talk about the update to the climate forecast planning that would be used by those 3 or 4 documents, I think I totally agree. Have you talked with Scott about what he envisioned, where he envisions that slotting in? And I don't know if we need to get into it tonight.
Yes, yeah, Adam, it came up when we went over the water plan,
Yeah.
because I looked through where the last climate study was done.
Right.
And he suggested it be put into the water management and conservation plan. So I had him put that wording in the water master plan that we were going to put it there.
Right. And I think he mentioned that Monday. I'm not totally sure if it was in, I get which meetings are which, but I guess the point being, that's another one of those examples of, if we know what the commission is wanting, we can at least feed you back with, here's how staff sees it, fitting. And if it's not, if that's too long, if that doesn't work, if you don't like the logic of what staff is, is how they're integrating it, then at least we know that and we can talk about it. And I think that's a great example of one that I think Scott has a good plan of how to integrate that in to do exactly what you're describing, is have it be a useful, critical background technical document to reference all of those plans.
Right.
Exactly. So I don't want to take a whole lot more time of this meeting, because Ray, my understanding is you're going to come back with a written document, because some of this is you're doing work and having a written thing that informs the commission, so that when we come to these meetings, if you have some particular decision you need us to make, that we can do that. Or if we all read whatever it is that you've written and say, oh, the right thing is happening, we really don't need to belabor this right now.
Okay, I think also I want to reach out to Jeff and get him involved in some of this as well.
Yes, that would be great. Julian?
Do you want me to give you a few lines about the pool?
That particular one is on a future agenda item, and so I think I'd like to defer that to when that next comes up, and you and I can talk about that when we're doing an agenda formation exercise. There's somebody else I think had their hand up.
I
Bob?
did. It was about the pool, and it wasn't so much about a master plan for the pool. It's actually, you know, just making sure that the design of the rebuild of the pool doesn't go for natural gas heating again. So, you know, I don't know that it's so much of a master planning
Right, so
process than just
we
the
need
contract.
to be sure that happens. I would be amazed if anybody actually does that personally, because solar heating is such an obvious choice.
I think it will be natural.
But that's
gas
just my
unless we do
personal
something about
opinion.
You-
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Julian?
it. I think it will be natural gas unless we make an effort to make sure that
Yeah.
there's not natural gas.
Okay, well, that's
I think so
unfortunate.
too. I think so too.
So I've talked with Michael Black about it just last week, and he's fully prepared to be, you know, in the bids will include, you know, cost estimates and design that isn't natural gas. You know, spoiler alert, you know, there's some cost involved. You know, that was unofficial staff to staff stuff. It doesn't hurt to clearly to have a statement of intent and request from this commission. You know, obviously that's a separate elected body. This commission isn't necessarily advisory to, but our council does have a, depending upon how that all works from financing, there is obviously a connection between the two elected bodies. So I don't think it hurts, but I just want to chime in. That's another one where I think staff is already kind of planning and hearing, you know, the informal stuff and is integrating, you know, that into at least the option matrix.
Okay, well, so that's good to hear, because obviously my presumption was wrong. And so Julian, we'll have to take that all into account when we do the agenda.
And just quickly, we did talk about it when the pool project came in front of council. I don't know what their plan is for in terms of financing it, because the financing mechanism has gone sideways with COVID. But they did say to council that they understood the issue and that they were working on it. So and we asked specifically, are we going to get to see, you know, the next level of design, because we were sort of looking for this. So I'll be watching for it as well. But I think a letter just expressing our hope from this commission is a good idea.
Yeah, I think that might be all it takes at this stage in the game. And then, like I say, when you see the actual, you know, option packages come through, then you can have specific commentary.
Also, I'd like to propose that Jeff and Ray bring such a letter to the next meeting. Is there any objection to that? Hearing none, you guys are on. Okay, so does that wrap up the section, Ray, that you were leading? Okay.
Yes.
The next thing is the electric master plan. Adam and I had a bit of a chat about this, and I think, Adam, you had taken on to go and think about it and pursue it a little bit. So just to set the stage a little bit, the notion that's on the table is whether CPC should be taking some sort of lead role in creating the strategic part of the master plan for the electric utility. And I'd like to hear Adam comment on that.
So this was one of those I mentioned earlier as part of the co-authoring of the document of the C back in 1617. This is one that I strongly advocated and wrote up and got in there because I, you know, historical context. I think I've said it at a previous CPC. We've got 2/3 of a master plan for the electric utility already. We've never had the other third, or the umbrella, either way you want to look at it. We have the infrastructure plan, we have the cost of service rate design, we have both of those pieces. But what we don't have is the kind of the thing that glues that all together, which is what are the policies, plans, objectives, how do we want to operate that utility. So I'm an advocate for this. I think it's a good idea. How the CPC fits with this, you know, I had always originally envisioned it as somewhat of an intermediate RFP consultant project, because there's very specific electric utility industry issues that we want to be grabbing expertise from in the building of this, and then the CPC being the primary ongoing sounding board, review body, any words you want to use, that the consultant then, kind of like what we did with the SEEP in general, Cascade came and the SEEP committee was the ongoing kind of monitor, feedback loop, recommender, advisor to the process. And I see the CPC following that same sort of template and being the role for this. It's a much more narrow, specific thing. And I think then can function as any components that should or could involve public outreach. This is a natural group for that part to flow through as well as some of the technical review. I think you've obviously got the chops to do a technical review of what the consultant is doing. I think probably the leading part that we would want to have, probably a focus of multiple agendas, ongoing. It's a devotion of time for the CPC if you want to have this level of involvement. And I think a lot of it up front is, what's the outline? What's the scope? What all do we think something like this should contain? Initial research from this group to augment what Tom, Stu, and I would be doing on the staff side, I think would be excellent. And then we compile and come up with, here's what we're envisioning this document to be, and what it's supposed to contain. Then it's in a format to get off to a consultant, and they run through it. So that's how I've always envisioned this project. It can go other ways, I suppose. And I think we can figure out what the window of time is. It's probably if we're getting on it sort of soon, which I think we have I haven't talked with Tom about it specifically this week. We have the ability to jump on it, and it's around June 30, September 1 completion. That depending upon what snags are for procurement, contract, all that kind of stuff of getting a consultant. End of June might be pushing it. It probably would go a little past, and it would be, like I say, a reoccurring agenda item for this group as kind of a regular basis thing until it's done. So that's what's in my head for it, and I think it's valuable, and I think we do have the funding appropriations to get it going.
So Adam, the goal or the work product initially would be an RFP.
Yes, it would be, and embedded with that RFP is really kind of an outline of what this thing is, and so yeah, you're right. It'd be contained in that, and that would be the catalyst to then get the consultant and actually build this thing out.
And the date for the RFP would be June or earlier than that?
No, I was thinking earlier. No, way far earlier. It would take several meetings. That we could maybe get that RFP out in January. It would be a probably a reasonable window.
Okay, so what I have in mind is for this group to task Jeff, Ray, and I to come back with the beginnings of what might go in that RFP at the November meeting. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does, and I would just, when I think about this master planning process for the electric utility, one of the things I'm particularly interested in is just what is our plan for sort of optimizing or maximizing local renewable energy in our system. And I want to, I wasn't quite hearing that, Adam, so much in what you were explaining. Maybe I just missed it. But that's what I would hope is a major component of this RFP. So I've just put that comment in there for the three of you as you go after your work, just because we know that we're in this window with Bonneville, and so what does that actually look like for our electric utility how are we seeing this fuel switching turn into demand over the next 10 years? And how are we seeing that demand then met, to what extent, by local renewable energy? And, you know, to me, that's a big part of this operational conversation. And when Tom was here at our last meeting, you know, he was clear that we have quite a bit of capacity in our system, you know, for transmission, but that different, you know, if we're loading up renewable energy that's being generated locally, then that's different than just energy kind of coming through the system. And so to me, that's a lot of what I'm hoping we're answering, or that the electric department's answering with this master planning process.
Absolutely. No, that you're right. That's a core, that to me is exactly, are we a distribution utility? Are we a, what are we? And what is that transformation? What are the options? What are those options? What are they informed by? What does that do to our 10-year infrastructure plan? I mean, you have to have that to then know what you really want your infrastructure plan to look like in the future, a future infrastructure.
Exactly.
We're really
Yeah.
good at capitalizing on our existing infrastructure. So no, I'm right there with you.
One of the things that RMI has done very well is providing resources for us to wind our way through all of the things you guys are talking about. So rather than trying to preemptively create this thing, I think the three of us can go and bring something back.
Yep, I think that would be excellent.
Okay, good. Next on the agenda is SOCAN survey report. This got pushed from a previous meeting due to time constraints. I'm assuming that you all are familiar with it. Is there any commentary that somebody would like to bring up? Yeah.
Just
Chris? I'm sorry, I think Chris raised his hand first.
I'm sorry, that wasn't intentional. That was just saying goodbye to a fellow employee.
Oh. Okay. Jeff, you're on.
Okay. Oh, well, just a general comment is the respondents to the survey were self-selected in the sense that they're people that are interested in these kind of issues. So I wouldn't think that it's exactly representative of all the, the population of Ashland. But having said that, there's quite a lot of enthusiasm to address the kinds of issues that we're talking about on this. But again, this is not representative of the population or the voter base of Ashland. So we'd have to be a little bit careful about cherry picking this and saying this is what, the people we represent really think about these issues.
Bob?
Yeah, no, I agree completely with Jeff that it isn't representative. And I think it's pretty careful to say that it's not representative. It's representative of people who care a lot about climate, who decided to take the time to fill out the survey. And then in addition to the little bubbles on certain levels of thinking about it, they filled out a lot of text with a lot of additional information. And I think what the survey provides is it provides the SOCAN Ashland Climate Action Group, and I'm not part of that, but I'm married to somebody who's part of that, so I know something
So
about
you're part of it.
So I'm not speaking for them, but I'm just saying that what it has provided them is a list of very interested and engaged Ashlanders that could be a resource for other work that we may want to draw on expertise more broadly in the community. And I think also it's certainly a group that will be pushing forward to see how they can support Ashland's efforts to implement the climate action plan. But yes, no, it's not representative. But it is a resource.
Ray?
I think also it's an example of the work done in creating the survey and gathering the data is an example of what we might want to use in a broader sense to get a better idea of what Ashland thinks.
And I would just add into that in 2016, the GEOS Institute did a representative survey of Ashlanders on the issue of climate, and certainly not the same questions that SOCAN just asked, but I think maybe there's a way to put SOCAN, the answers that SOCAN was able to gather in the context of the sort of the scientifically valid survey that a couple of years ago came back that Ashlanders are very strongly concerned about this. And so I think what we might think about doing is, how do we appropriately use this information from both of these surveys, which of course have different origins and different levels of representation. But I would like to, I think the earlier survey made it we got very strong results that Ashlanders want to see action. And so, so maybe if that's the backdrop and we're careful with how far we extrapolate this information, I think it's possible that we could still make good use of it.
One additional comment that I shared a number of the previous comments as well, is that the survey indicates that the knowledge of SEEP is not widespread through the community. And my feeling is that CCOC is the right body to pursue that. CPC is not going to take that on as one of its responsibilities. So I'm seeing heads nodding the right way. So I'll assume that's where this is going. Okay, unless there's something else about that survey, I'd like to move on. The next thing is built environment, the PV ready requirements. Julian, I think you were going to lead a discussion on that.
Well, so I spoke with Mark Knox of KDA Homes, and the things that I learned from him are that I believe in 2019, Kate Brown made a proclamation, I don't know what the proper word for it is, but committed the state to having all new residential construction PV ready by 2022. So it was over a 3-year time span, and the end of that would have been 2022, as I understand it. And I think that by 2023, all commercial buildings also are supposed to be, all new commercial buildings are supposed to be photovoltaic, solar ready as well. I think Mark Knox was saying that all of KDA's homes are already, or are currently solar ready, and so I guess Ashland may be a bit ahead of the curve there. And the ordinance, or the decision from 2019 about the state's transforming to solar ready includes having wiring in place to take the inverters and the other electrical equipment to support the solar panels. I mean, it includes roof space as well as the wiring already being in place to have it go live as soon as you buy the panels. What I don't know is to what extent Executive Order 2004 alters either the timeline or how that's going to go forward. And I guess the thing that I'm still unclear about is how the building codes are going to be changed and to what extent there's any flexibility within those building codes here in Ashland to change the way that people build homes in Ashland. So, I mean, I think that it's not the final results of the processing of Kate Brown's 2004 are not yet in, and so I don't think anybody knows, but that's the biggest uncertainty in my mind. And I don't know how much the Built Environment Work Group or Ashland can do until those codes are finalized.
Jeff?
Last meeting, we talked a little bit about building codes, and the April 2021 residential building codes includes the solar ready provision. So houses that comply with that, new construction has to comply with that when this code is implemented next April. So that basically the requirements that you just covered.
Adam?
Yeah, I was just gonna, Jeff beat me to it. I was gonna say the same thing. That just got announced, I think, last week. I just saw the actual code language about that. So it's the electrical stuff. It's all the boxes and all the specs in the electrical code that require that step. So that's one step. And I just had this on my desk. That's the executive order that Julian's talking about. You know, and a lot of these, of course, the executive order means that then the various state agencies in charge of implementing them are charged with moving forward. So the executive order itself doesn't do it, but it triggers all of these things to happen. And what Jeff just described has already occurred. And so I've had conversations with Stu and also checking up the state pipeline. I'm not so certain that the roof space piece will, you know, the solar reserve piece is going to be able to fit into a state building code framework. Typically what we've expected that to be done at a local level in the land use code. But I'm not sure, you know, that's something we're tracking to see whether or not that's going to come through the state building code pipeline or not. If it's not, then where it would fit would be, as Mark talked at a CPC meeting, I don't know, pre-COVID, when he came and spoke, that would be a local chapter 18, our local land use code that we could implement locally. So that is available for us because it's not necessarily restricted and in the part of the thing that is mandated by the state that we can't mess with. It doesn't have to be part of the structural code. If we mandated that certain substructures and the roof, you know, had to be you know, constructed to hold a certain weight that was beyond what the current state code would be, we can't do that. That's not a legal thing. But just to reserve and not have roof penetrations in a certain % of the roof area, I think we can do that locally. But we're working on verifying which path that goes. So it's an added piece. But there's a whole lot in there in the executive order, obviously. And this came out when it came out in February, and then we had COVID, and I mean it's been. No, 10th day of March. Wow. So it was like days before before COVID. So I'm not sure where all it has gone to all the other components and into the state kind of systems. But we're tracking it in all of our different spots, our building official, our planners, for all of the different pieces that go to our you know, our different departments.
So, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, two questions. One just about what it includes and what it doesn't include. I'm wondering, does it include also the siting on the lot to be able to capture maximum solar resources, and the design of the roof so that it's actually got a run that will capture, that will accept enough panels and is not, you know, designed in such a way that it really is not facing towards the sun? And I'm seeing Adam shake his head no. So it seems like it doesn't do any of that, which is
that's a land use thing. So
that's something that we could do.
And we have some of that in our code already. You know, for the orientation, it doesn't mandate it. We also, I mean, some of our solar ordinance obviously almost mandates it, but doesn't. But functionally gets close to mandating that by which way the gable needs to point. But so we have some of that in our code, and it could be probably strengthened. That's another, you know, that's really the planning department and the planning commission pipeline for that. But that's a land use thing.
Okay.
Well, so
the other, my second question, the second question is not Ashland specific, but there's going to be a lot of rebuilding after April 2021 in our neighboring towns. And I'm wondering if this is going to apply to reconstruction or construction of new housing in Talent and Phoenix.
You know, the executive order isn't the actual code, right? It's the intent or mandate for those agencies to work on putting it through their code processes. The provision that Jeff mentioned would be the only, I'm not certain, my asterisk would be manufactured homes are under a different code than the Oregon electrical code. They're in their own code section. I don't know for sure that this applies to manufactured housing. It may or may not. So for that segment, it might be different. But likely, you know, these go through some of them, if various groups appeal and hold up, you know, hearings and getting various sections approved and all that rulemaking process, it doesn't all go in as a clump. There'll be pieces, parts sporadically spread through the various code updates. And the code updates don't happen all at the same time either. So a structural code, then a plumbing code. So, it's incremental throughout. But whatever is approved, and in code at the time the plans are submitted for review, that's the code it gets built to.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the building codes may or may not do what needs to be done, and it is unlikely to be totally complete in what needs to be done. So, and that we have some ability at the local level to use the land use planning code to make things happen.
For certain components.
Sorry?
For certain components, there are some
Yes,
elements
right,
that are state building code only. Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is whether the built environment focus area wants to come back next month with anything specific that they want the commission to do to move forward with the land use planning side of that.
Well, so we've had an ongoing discussion with Stu at the meetings prior to COVID anyway, about what things fall outside of the building codes that we could even influence or write ordinances about, or have some role in. And up until today, and Adam's description of what's going on at the moment, there wasn't any particular parameters given to us. So what Adam told me today is more than I had understood about the process previously. So it's not something that we had overlooked, but we just didn't have much information about it, I guess I would say.
Okay, well, so does it make sense to chat with perhaps both Adam and Stu and decide if there's a way to go forward?
Yeah.
Part of that discussion, I think it's great, but will also be again the capacity of our planning department and their existing workload. The last legislature put down a whole lot of housing mandates that we have till June 30 to get through planning commission and council. There are a large number of kind of legislative ordinance items already in the pipeline. So again, those are great conversations, and I want to have them. I want to get them spec'd out. They'll sound crazy when I say, cool, it looks like the first quarter of 2022 we can get that slotted, but that's what the planning department works on. They work on a 18 to 36 month work plan timeline. Their projects typically, especially public facing projects and legislative items, take a long time, and they're very involved. So just as an awareness and a expectation setting, there's a lot of pressures on the planning department, and a lot of them are mandated from the state side of things. But we want to have all these on a list and put into a pipeline.
Right. So what would you suggest we do in order to get into the pipeline whenever it might come up?
Well, I think you want to prioritize, here in this group, prioritize which are the most, most important in your eyes, and hopefully with discussion from us on the staff side, what, we can help you say which ones we think are the smoothest to get in, the least impactful from an opposition standpoint, or from also an added cost to housing construction costs. That's a factor that needs to be considered. We also need to fit it in with what are the other things the Wildfire Commission is wanting to do. They have an ask that the planning department will need to work on for some fire adapted construction standards. So there's multiple things floating into those pipelines.
Yeah, I think we get all that. The question is, should we be starting to go forward with the solar reserve area for roofs at this time, or would you say we should defer that?
I would say you should communicate what you think are current land use code opportunities that further SEEP initiatives, and then we can get a response for where they practically would fit in the pipeline. So okay. I think we want to put those out there.
So Julian and Bob, as representatives of built environment, does that all make sense? And you're going to do the right thing?
And Chris.
Yep, sorry. Okay. So I think we're on to electrifying Ashland. Bob, you want to take it away?
Okay, yeah, I can start us off. So this, as you recall, this is in our August meeting, Tanya and Rick presented a memo to the CPC prioritizing our work for the next bit and characterizing it as electrifying Ashland and then working on planning. So in order to try to make the first piece, which is a huge task, something more digestible, Stu and I were tasked with trying to projectize it, trying to put it into a bunch of more discrete, smaller tasks, but some of them are still quite big, that could serve as a roadmap for the way forward. So we did that and then put it in a set of priorities that could be done in the first year. It should be really the focus of the first year. That was on the agenda for the last meeting. But we didn't get a chance to review it, but had a brief discussion about the concept of it. And Rick and I were tasked with going back and trying to streamline it a little bit more and really be clear about where it's going to be in the built environment area, focus area, and where it's going to be more in the utilities area. So what you see before you now is the same outline, but things moved around a bit to try to make a little bit more sense conceptually. Still breaking the task down into consumption versus generation as the two broad areas, but consumption really matching perfectly the built environment focus area and generation, the utilities focus area. So I think what we're I think the task really before us today, I don't think it's necessary to go through all the list of items. Everybody's had that and had a chance to read it. I think our task here is to see whether there are things that should be on here that are not on here. Are there items on here that are on here that shouldn't be on here? Or do we want to amend some of them? So taking ideas from the commission for changes to the actual list of on the outline. And then a second task would be to really prioritize. What are the priorities that we want to go forward on? We've already talked about some of the items in the preceding discussion, having to do with land use plan, having to do with the electric master plan. And there are others too that we have not talked about. And then the third task is really, can we go ahead and assign individual responsibilities today, ideally, so that we have leads that can go back and do the work, do the consultation with people that need to be consulted with in order to bring back to this commission, step by step, completed work over the next, several months. So that's what I think the task is, and I don't know. Do you need me to do any more introduction, Rick, than that?
No, you're doing a great job. Just keep leading the discussion, please.
Okay, so I guess the first thing is, are there items that are on here that shouldn't be on here? Is anybody? So if they're not, yeah, Adam?
I just have a question for you on it. Stu did send this to me, and I have to admit I did not have a chance to look at it, so I'm looking at it fresh. Is there an objective or a spot in the process where this is going to be kind of prioritized?
You mean the list?
Or has this been? Yeah.
So the idea, that's the task right here in this meeting. So the items that are in red are my ideas of what would be the first priorities, and that's based on discussions with Stu and with Rick about what things are really match well with what staff is already working on, and what things are logically sequenced so that they need to happen before something else.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was reading while you were talking and I didn't catch it. My bad.
Okay, that's fine. So yes. So again, to organize this discussion, if nobody has anything that is missing from the list, or nobody has anything that should be taken off the list, what did I ask first? I can't remember which I asked first. Let's just do both of them at the same time. Anything that should be taken off the list, anything that should be added to the list.
It's not clear to me that establishing a residential tool library is something CPC should take on. That sounds more like a CCO thing to me.
Okay. Is there any? I don't even see it. What item is it?
152.
152, yes, okay. You think that's something that should be a CCOC?
Well, if they're willing to accept it, but in any event, I don't know that it is likely to ever be the highest priority item for CPC.
It's certainly not a prioritized item for this year.
You know, one of the things that we might want to think about too is just some of these items that end up not being prioritized in the near term could be picked up not even just by other commissions but by other entities in the community. And if we get clear about what those things are, so that we can let people know that this is needed, it's desired, but it's not rising to the action level at the city. I think that could be helpful. I know Stu has been putting a major emphasis on how do we integrate and really work with community partners. And so I think it's useful maybe to keep it on this list, knowing that we've sort of set it aside and it's not likely to be a priority for us, but just to kind of to hand it to the CCOC, not necessarily as something that they would take on unless they want to, but something that goes on that kind of list for the larger community.
So yeah, that's right. That's good. And this was an item that Stu put on, and he actually suggested link to the Jackson County Library because they do have they are developing a tool library. So the idea would not be that the city would do this, but there's something that a community partner like the Jackson County Library System would take on, and maybe alleviate some of the cost that might be an issue for some community members if they were not using or if they're getting rid of their gas-powered small lawn and garden equipment. If they could borrow something from a tool library, that might be an option. But yeah,
yeah, I've heard that's at least conceptually in the works. Kind of an interesting partner in that. It kind of makes sense.
So let's see, so let's look at the items that were in red as what I suggested as the first year emphasis, I guess. So if we look at the consumption first, the first item is engage the planning department about land use and other codes. So we were just talking about that. And I think I heard some direction from the commission for a few people that are working in the built environment focus area to kind of prioritize among those land use discussions some of these items. And Julian, are you saying yes, or are you saying you want to talk?
Oh, yes, I agree. Yes, we need to do that.
Okay.
But your question again, or maybe a comment, that list varies greatly in terms of investment of time and resource in pulling them off. So maybe that's a conversation when we were talking, we could have offline about kind of getting a handle on what all those entail in the land use process. So that gives the commission idea of that thing, one is a big giant thing and one is maybe more tightly packaged. That would be some usefulness, and then kind of sub-prioritization exercise maybe, because a couple of those are, the density bonus thing is a big deal. Some of the other ones are a little more self-contained.
Okay. So a criteria for picking among those would be the level of effort that would be required. Maybe another criterion would be the impact that it would have in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
Okay. The next item that was identified in red is with the existing buildings, and it's really the first area. It's prioritizing residential over commercial or over commercial. Within residential, it's really looking at the either a home energy score program or creating an energy retrofit Ashland loan program, which Stu has already talked about. We heard from Adam today that some of the finances for that, the grant financing for that didn't come through, but maybe there are still other ways to think about creative financing for energy retrofits. There's a lot of detail in there. These sub items were different sources that Stu had in mind as possibilities.
Bob, develop a home energy score program. I mean, there is one. Are you thinking, and there's about 3 different national ones. So are you thinking of developing a different one than already exists or making one available?
Making one available.
Yeah,
Applying it here to Ashland. No, we
Okay.
wouldn't.
Yeah, I think Portland is a good example of the direction that we were thinking about when this got inserted. They already have a requirement for an energy score in order to do a transaction, a real estate transaction.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some really good lessons learned on that one that I think would make it far easier for us to be the next people to do it instead of the first people that they had to run across. So I've talked with their program manager, got some good leads.
And that was in Portland, you said?
Yeah.
It's really developing a requirement to have a home energy score.
Well, there's a couple different ways to do it. I think that's a strategy conversation. You put it in place as a voluntary thing with incentives to get people to do it, and then convert it over to a mandatory. You just go straight to a requirement of MLS sale. There's some options in there, I think, for the commission to kind of consider and strategize, or both. I mean, you can do both concurrent. You can mandate it and provide some money for it.
So for a concrete step, just as an example, you could be researching what went on in Portland and having the built environment focus group familiarize themselves with that.
So I think in terms of the process here in this meeting, what I was hoping we would do is come up with the priorities, and then the next step would be the individuals would take the task on and then figure out what the steps are, because each one of these, I mean, I didn't try to get down to the very, very fine level of step by step to actually get any one of these things done. Leave it to the individual lead to do that, and come back to the commission and report on that.
Sounds good.
The next item has to do with municipal operations. It's develop a municipal facilities plan to electrify and increase efficiency within the city. This is obviously the city's emissions are a tiny percentage of total Ashland emissions, but the city is you got to walk the talk, and be a demonstration of what can be done. So this would be a first step, really seeing how far away are we from electrifying municipal operations, municipal facilities. Other government ratepayers are really, but Stu had identified the different kinds of ratepayers. There's residential, there's commercial, there's municipal, and there's other government. And other government is SOU and Ashland School District. So this is starting to have that outreach with them and see what they are prepared to do to electrify their operations.
So do you want us to vote on how high of a priority each one of these things are right at the moment?
So that would probably be there are a lot of these that are, I mean, we're trying to prioritize among a long list, and there's still a lot among this long list. So maybe we should prioritize them like that, or alternatively, the approach that I was thinking is that people would start to volunteer for each of these different tasks, bring back kind of like a work plan for what that might involve, and have done more of the thinking of at the level of detail that Rick was suggesting for the I guess for the scorecard, and then come back, and then we could have the commission could decide at the next meeting whether that's something we should continue to devote our effort to it or not. But we can do it either way.
Well, this particular task is something that has been my personal project for some time.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that it has been a very slow process, and I can give you a more detailed history of it, but I don't think it's very interesting to you at the moment. But I mean, yes, that's a high priority for me. I'm happy to do it. I was doing it before. I mean, to the extent that I was able to, and I'll do it as much as I can in the future.
I'm sorry, which one are you referring to, Jillian?
Well, the discussion of the possibility of electrifying SOU, the Ashland School District, also the Asante Ashland Hospital, as well as OSF, whatever.
Okay, so the government ratepayers,
Those aren't, the last two
more or
are,
less.
they're not government players. The Asante is no longer government, I guess.
Right.
It's,
Yeah, no, that's why I'm waffling.
and the OSF is clearly not government.
Just large consumers.
Large consumers. Yeah, so I think what you're suggesting, rather than voting on what's the priority, you've already jumped forward and said, you raised your hand, you want to take leadership on this, and you'll develop the kind of an organized, report for the next meeting. On the front page, I guess it was, drafted, kind of the task for the next meeting. Well, let's talk about that after we go through the list, I guess, about what makes sense to report back to the next meeting so we can continue to make progress on this. Now we're into electrifying new buildings. So here we've got the two items that were under electrifying new buildings were EV ready wiring in new residential construction and PV reservation and protection for new construction. We've talked a little bit about PV reservation. Are these priorities? Yeah, Adam?
I think the 1.3.4 is done as of, the state code. We could provide a little recap for you on the actual code language, but I think, as Jeff mentioned, we got some April 1 code implementation.
Okay.
Or, excuse me, that was PV. I'm not reading it right. This is EV. Never mind. That's still on the table.
Okay.
Scratch that.
Okay. And then there were three items under transportation that I prioritized. One was the seat participation in the transportation plan. That's really part of the planning process. We've talked about that as a priority before, whenever that gets started again. The use of the clean fuel credits, we talked about it earlier in this meeting, that's going to come back to this commission for some working with the staff to go to the council for recommendations on how that should be used. And then the lightweight, what we characterized as lightweight vehicles, having to do with both electric and human powered bicycles. That has to do with making Ashland, I think in the August meeting when we talked about electrifying Ashland, Gary made an ardent case for, not putting aside making Ashland safe for all ages and abilities in bicycling. And I think that's an attempt to capture that as well. It would be, in a sense, electrifying transportation by not using gas-powered engines, by using small electric-powered and human-powered bicycles.
I volunteer Gary to take primary responsibility for that task.
Yeah, I could have guessed that.
I think he'd love to do it.
I think he'll fight anyone else that wants to take it instead.
And did Stu report out already the BEF grant does have some funding, that we did get the 50,000. There is some for
e-bicycles.
E-bike. Okay.
Yeah, he mentioned. Yep. And then there's under electrify small motors, again, work that we've had already started, the phase out of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment, and starting with municipal operations is what we had said, I think, in the materials that had been sent to the March meeting but never got discussed. And I think that's also a Gary item.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to work on that as well. I mean, as an overlap with APRC, it's something that I've already brought to APRC, and we have discussed it to some extent. It all got derailed through the summer, but it's an ongoing project.
Great.
And I would just add that we're talking about it both combo. I mean, with city and parks, I've talked with Michael about it, and I think there's a pretty straightforward pathway on that one. So I think it's good.
Okay.
And just as an anecdotal story, I've already run into a landscape maintenance company that has committed to making that transition. And I've seen them experimenting with it. I have noticed they come back with their gas powered stuff. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'd like to volunteer the landscaping company that does the work with my neighbor's house every Wednesday. And see if we can convince them to use something besides noisy gas-powered lawn and garden equipment. Okay, so that was the list, I guess, the prioritized list from the built environment. Do we want to add anything? Were those priorities the priority? I think we've said that those are all the priorities. Do we want to add additional priorities that were not? And what we didn't do is we have some volunteers, Julian and Gary have volunteered for several items. I wonder if maybe we should just go back up to the items 1.3.4 and 1.3.5, and maybe whether Chris, are you interested in taking those on as the lead? EV ready wiring in new residential construction and PV reservation and protection in new construction?
Yes, that would be.
Okay. And then on the first, so we don't have a volunteer for, well, the residential, I would like to volunteer for the residential home energy score program and an energy retrofit program, and to take the lead on that. And we don't have a volunteer for the planning, land use planning work. I wonder whether Gary would be willing to take that on. That's kind of more consistent with his background. Julian, do you have an idea whether?
Well, yes. I mean, yes, he would be interested. I mean, I can't speak for him, but I know that he's been very keen to have the SEAT incorporated into the comprehensive plan, which I think would automate that process. So.
It would, but I think that's separate from Electrify Ashland, because there is that whole task as well. But yes, but they're related.
Are you speaking to 1.1, Bob?
Yes, 1.1. I'm sorry. I skipped back up because I realized it would have been much better for me to have asked for volunteers.
I would like to engage that one as well.
Okay. Yeah. Great. And okay, let's go on to the item 2, generation by source. So generation. The first item was, we already talked about, the electric master plan, which is a huge item. The first 3 items on it, I think, are sequentially the kinds of things that need to happen, over the next several months. And I was encouraged that Adam thought that we could actually even have the complete consulting report done by somewhere in the June to September timeframe. So do we have somebody to lead the work on the electric master plan items 2.11, 2.12, and 2.13? I think they really kind of go together.
I thought we had already tasked 3 of us to basically take that whole thing on.
Oh, yes, you're right. Okay. So that was Ray, that was you, and that was Jeff. Okay, great.
Yeah, and just a comment on the follow-on items. We'll see how the RFP goes in terms of if Ashland wants to get involved with all that other stuff for resiliency and storage and batteries and et cetera. So I agree with the priority. Let's get the first one done.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that to me, that's all wrapped up in there. I mean, that's microgrid stuff, solar, renewable energy goals, what kind of other energy services offerings that our electric utility might want to get into. All that is part of, to me, that electric master plan.
Tanya?
Hi, thanks, Bob. One of the things that I've been thinking about is just that we still have this 1 megawatt system that we can put up somewhere in Ashland. And I know that there's a proposal for the wastewater treatment facility area. And then when the airport commission folks came in front of council and they gave their annual report, one of the things that they said is that they sort of stand ready to help with solar at the airport. So there's some level of engagement. And I don't know, Adam, if you know if anything is developing at the airport, but I think one of the things that we should do is figure out where is the best where is the best place for that, and who is the best entity for building it, and get it moving. It seems like we have a couple of options anyway of where it might go. So is that something that would possibly belong on this list?
So it is on the list. We didn't, I didn't prioritize
You just didn't
it as-
prioritize it.
It's but it's under item 2.1.5.3. So
Oh, that's how I missed it.
doesn't mean it's a big item, but it was, you know, it's among a number of big items under improving resilience through distributed generation.
Yeah, so, you know,
Okay, there it is. Okay, I see it. I didn't see that for some reason when I was going through.
And maybe we should should put that up on the priorities for the first years, thinking that through, and what would be the approach? Would that be something that the city would develop on its own account? Would it be something that the city would do with some other entity that would build the project, and then the city be the off taker, or
Something? Yeah, I don't know the best. I don't know what the process is for that, but I would be interested in working on that. And of course, if Adam has any updates on kind of where that is, but I think we should get that built.
Yeah, so let's put it on the 1-year list then.
Okay, Adam?
So yeah, we've definitely been talking about it. Scott, Public Works, they manage the airport, obviously, and also the wastewater plant. You know, and I think the wastewater plant's less likely of a location given what it was actually purchased for and what the phased plans for that site are. But the airport, you know, I think so far is like a, you know, internal leading contender. But I think as important as the location is, you know, it was the question that just came up of what kind of structure is it? Is it a city, you know, purchased, owned, operated? Is it a third party? How does that, you know, does that work? And I think from a timeline, you know, the 1-year thing, I don't think it's realistic to have it built in a year, but have a, you know, I think it's worthy of being on it for now, because we are working our way towards that regardless. And I think we'll gain from the master plan effort with that. So I think it kind of tags along in there almost anyway, because it's the great example of how do we make a decent swing. Maybe it's not a home run swing, but we maybe squeeze a double out of it or something. You know, it's a worthy thing, and we're creeping our way towards understanding how at least what the options are, and then we have to do some financial stuff to see what, you know, what's the financially best options are for how it's funded and operated, and then how it works with BPA, because it's still a process even though it's allowed, it's a BPA administrator authorized approval specifically. It's not outright approved.
Yeah, I think I recognize that there's a lot of process involved with it, but I would like it on our work plan for this next 12 months, and I'm happy to help with that. And then also, we kind of went past it, but also I'm interested in the energy retrofit Ashland loan program and figuring out the funding sources for that. So if you could put my name next to that, that would be great.
Yes. Okay, great. I'm also interested in the freestanding projects, and particularly the project finance structure, because I think you know, whether the city does it on its own account, there's a cost that's an on budget versus doing it off books with a third party, and there's a higher cost probably for that, but there's maybe some cases there's a greater political appetite to get things financed that way, which is maybe not in the best financial interest of the city, but maybe the best, the only feasible. Okay, so then let's, since we've gone through and prioritized and got volunteers, and I think we've got just a couple minutes left, I'd like to go back to paragraph number 3, right at the front. What Rick and I had discussed is maybe if each person who volunteered to take the lead would, for the next meeting, prepare just a 1-page task, you know, a little bit more about the task than is on this one line, and how they see it going forward. And then submit that to the chair by October 29th in order to really get it on the agenda for the next for the next meeting, which is on November 12th. So we would have, today's the 8th, 3 weeks for anyone that volunteered to take the lead on any of these items. And what I guess I can do, or we should capture who took the lead on all these. I'll do that. I'll send it in an email to Elizabeth to distribute to everybody. And then that person will take the lead, and I'll communicate with Gary too, since he was volunteered in absentia, to keep us moving forward. And I think the objective here is to let's get some momentum and move forward on some of these things. Okay.
Okay, so you're done?
I'm done. I think I am, unless everybody tells me I'm not.
Not seeing heads wiggle the wrong way, so I guess you're done. And as Adam, I'm wondering how we should work through you and Stu to figure out. It still seems like a lot for staff to be supporting. And so how do you see that staff availability feeding back into this process?
Well, yes, it is a lot. The good part is it's not all dumped in one department's lap or one person's lap. So I need to do a little homework myself. Maybe my one pager through Stu. I'll follow Bob's lead on the one page thing. I like how you brought up the assignment, what you had to do after everybody put their name on it. Then you told them what they had to do and when it was due. That was good work. But maybe I'll try the same approach and just do a one pager of who I see this, going to, the particular red items, what I see is kind of a very general workload estimate for those, and maybe my warning signs of what might be in the way of it, just at a very, very cursory level, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, particularly if any of these you think are going to have to go in front of council before anything can happen, tagging them that way would be very useful.
Yeah, and I think that would help, because the land use ones, like I've said, that's a big bottleneck. There's a lot going on right there, and those take a long time. And so some of it's just a expectation reality check too, and then we can move from there.
So okay, Ray?
Just a little different subject since we're running out of time. You had something on the schedule about APRC pool rep. Do we have a name? That's you, Julian?
Well, I meet both criteria. I'm on APRC and I know about the pool.
Well, I mean, Jeff and I are going to come back with a letter for recommendation on the pool. So I wanted to talk to somebody. I didn't want to, to get where things are now to understand what we're going to recommend in the future. Would that be you?
First, it would be Michael Black,
Okay.
Director Black.
Bob?
Yeah, just to close out the previous point, I was just going to say that I'll volunteer to summarize this with the names and the tasks for the one pagers, and then I'll send that to Elizabeth for her to distribute to everybody else.
Great.
Is that the right process, Elizabeth? Okay.
Okay, is there anything else? I think we had a really productive meeting, and I thank you all for being here. And I'm gaveling it closed. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Bye.